Hi everyone, we've got a bit of a leaky chimney in our house at the moment, and last winter it was literally raining in the house, so it's time to do something about that. So here's the chimney in question, and we're going to make a cover that goes all the way over the top to keep the rain out. Started out by making a wooden frame that's going to sit on top of the chimney, and that's going to support a metal cover that's going to go over the top. So here's the frame, some bits of 3x2. Cut those down with the chop saw and the bandsaw. So this bit was a bit thick, so I just ran it through the bandsaw. And I also made some little gussets to go on the corners just to keep everything nice and square while I was working. Once it's screwed to the chimney, it's not such a problem, but while I'm building the frame, it needs something to just keep it square. So corners were liberally glued, and then some 4 or 5mm I think diameter screws driven in. Keep everything together while the glue goes off. Check it for square. It's nice and square, and then the gussets could go on the corners. Put those on again, plenty of glue, and they'll stay on for once it's all fitted. And then again some 4-ish 5mm diameter screws. So here's the frame. I've got it set up on some little blocks to get it level, so it's nice and level and square. And then that frame will sit on that slate lip that's a couple of inches or 100 or so millimetres down from the top of the chimney. So the cover is made from 18 gauge or 1.2mm aluminium sheet. And just cut that out with the plasma cutter and then trim it up, get rid of the rough edge with the aviation snips. And I could fold that up in the folder. This chimney cover is actually being made in 2 halves. It's 2 halves and then 2 ends, because the chimney is actually wider than a full sheet, and it's having to have a join in it, unfortunately. I made 2 in reality, one for the chimney on the other end of the house, and that one's a little bit smaller. So what you're actually watching here is the second cover being made. So I've kind of got my method sorted by now. So here's the wider half of the cover. So that's just folded up. It's a bit unwieldy, as you can see, but I managed. Not too bad. So that goes on the bench. A few markings on the back just to sort of tell me where the bend lines are and things. So here's the 2 halves clamped together on the frame. You can see the join line there. Now here's a little trick if you're sort of new to TIG welding. You might not know this one. If you've got any aluminium to do, it's quite difficult to find thin diameter aluminium TIG filler. So if you get a bit of MIG wire and put it in your drill, the other end in the vise, and then spin it up, it twists it all together, and then eventually the end will snap. Wait for it. There it goes. And then you can just trim the end off. Sometimes the end gets a bit grotty, it's kind of a bit over twisted, you have to throw that bit away. But then you end up with a wire that's ever so slightly larger, maybe only sort of a couple of tenths of a millimetre bigger in reality. So you might go from a 0.8 to 1mm or so, but you end up with a rod that's a lot stiffer like that, and you can use it just like a normal TIG filler rod, whereas if you try and just use MIG wire, it's just way too floppy. So just tacking the 2 halves together here. Joints all been prepped and cleaned, wipes or wire brush and wipe over with a bit of acetone. Just get that tacked together, and then here we are actually doing the weld. So I've left this bit of footage in here. It's there you go. There's a bit of welding, but you can see just for those of you who are not necessarily familiar with TIG, particularly with aluminium, this is one of the hazards you can run into. You see here that you can see the edge of the puddle, and there's the hole. So just back off and just blob a bit of extra filler in, bring it back, and then forwards and carry on. You've got to be quite quick, spot it coming, otherwise you can end up with a big hole in your aluminium. It goes away from you quickly. So that's all welded up, and then get that all lined up, and I've got a sheet on the bench that is going to be the end, so I can trace around the end and then cut that out with the bench shear, and then I flipped it over and did the same for the other end. So you get 2 nice fitting ends, because the fit up, particularly with thin sheet metal, is incredibly important. You can kind of get away with it with slightly thicker stuff, you can fill it in a bit, but with the thin material, it's got to be really good fit up. So just taping the joint up here to get a nice fit. It's a bit of a faff, but worth the effort. And then just kind of get everything lined up, and then I can put some tacks on it. So here we are putting the tacks on. Again, the corners have been prepped with the wire brush and a bit of acetone. So a few tacks there. One every couple of inches does the trick, and then just go around and just tap it back into shape, because the aluminium does move a heck of a lot when you weld it, especially compared to steel. So there we go, just getting everything lined up. And then I could weld that up with the filler rod that we made earlier. And you'll notice on my right hand I've got a bit of fiberglass braid. That's just to keep the heat off. So I could prep that for paint now. A bit of Scotch-Brite to give it a bit of a key, and then a wipe off with some solvent to get rid of any oils and greases. A bit of pre-paint panel wipe. And then mixed up some etching primer. If you don't use an etching primer on aluminium, the paint tends to fall off, so it just kind of eats its way into the top of the metal and makes sure that the paint sticks. So just roller that on. It's going on a roof, it doesn't need to be an automotive finish or anything like that. So paint that on with a roller, no problem. And then it got a coat of like an exterior metal grey paint, just to try and match it in with the roof a little bit and the lead work, so it didn't stick out like a sore thumb. So putting the wooden frame up here now. That was not too bad actually. I thought it was going to be a lot more challenging than it was, but thankfully it wasn't windy, and that just kind of slid over, and thankfully it fit. That would have been a pain to have to get it off again. So it's quite heavy in reality, or not so much heavy, but because it's sticking out a long way in front of you, it's quite a lot of a cantilever trying to pull you over, and then just fix that up with some exterior frame fixings. So with that in place, I could measure and mark out for where the chimney comes through the cover, because I didn't want to do this until I'd got the frame in place, just in case it was slightly off, especially as the chimney doesn't quite come up through the centre of the chimney stack. So that's cut out now, and then I could make a clamping ring that's going to go around the gasket that's going to seal the chimney to the roof. So there's the gasket, and that's going to sit on there like that. The chimney will come through, and then the clamping ring goes around the outside. I'll put the bend in shortly, and then that will be held in place with some pop rivets. And then the chimney comes through, and then I've got one of those storm-proof covers to keep the rain, the wind and the pigeons out. Now, getting this onto the roof was a challenge. It was ironically a bit of a windy day, unfortunately, but also the fact it's been painted and it's big and you don't want to scratch it or drop it and things like that. So got it up the scaffold easily enough, just pulled it up with a bit of rope, and then my arm was just long enough to reach over the top and into the hole that I'd cut for the chimney. And then I could get it on the top and just kind of bump it around a little bit to get it in place. Now you'll notice I am tied onto the roof here, misspent childhood rock climbing and things, so I got the climbing harness out and just chucked a rope around the top just in case the wind caught it and I didn't let go in time. You don't want to be hang gliding off the roof with that as the sail. So that slipped over the back corner easily enough, and then just massaged it around a little bit, and a little tap, and the front corner came down relatively easily and all lined up quite nicely. So went and got the level and got it all levelled up and things, and put some screws in. So here's the top with the cover on. I couldn't get up there with a camera unfortunately to video it, but I got some photographs, and there's the fixings holding it to the wooden frame, and here's the picture from the ground, and you can see I've done the one at the other end as well. So I hope you enjoyed that. Thanks for watching, and hopefully I'll have another video for you soon. Cheers.